Let's take another look at the Python code used to read data from a file, that is to test scores from a file, an external file, calculate the averages, and write the results to an output file. So let's take a quick look at that. We have our functions at the subfunctions. Then you have your main function. The main function will call all of the other subfunctions as described in the previous videos. All of these comments are important, so please include them. That's required in this course, as I have already indicated. Now, let's run the program. We're going to type in a name where we think that exists. It doesn't exist, so we're going to type, it's called T-scores. That file exists, and it says enter file name where the data will be written to. We're going to type in final test score averages report. And what it does is it displays where the bad data was located. You don't have to add that in the program. I always like to look at that, just error checking, or just to provide feedback to me immediately as to what's going on in that program. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of bad data. And then the last line just shows processing was completed, results written to the final test score averages report. Let's find that file now. Here's where that file was. That is what the computer produced. Now, you notice in this directory, the external file that was produced by the Python program is in the same folder where the data file was located, as well as the program file. And I have several copies of it, but they're all in the same folder. So let's open up this file to see what's in it. This is the report. That's what the computer generated, the code, the average, and then it even told me I wrote this total incorrect data items was 7. And if I were to look at the T-scores report, here's the data, and you can see the bad data, negative 55, B55, a negative C55, and so on, and X10. That was bad data. It was not a whole, it wasn't a float or real number, and if the number is positive, the computer takes it to be the good data. But if the number is negative, or it is anything other than floating number or a real number, the computer flagged it as designated in our program. So please pay attention to where your files are being stored. So the source code file, the data file, and the file that the computer will produce for you, where it writes the output, all of those are going to be inside the same folder. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of these functions except the main function. The main function needs to stay in the program, but these functions, we're going to remove them, place them inside a separate file. So you notice I cut them out. I'm going to go to File, New File, right click, Paste. I'm pasting all of these subfunctions inside of a separate Python program or module. And at the very end of this program, I'll type end custom functions program. At the very beginning of this program, I'm going to add custom functions. Why would I do something like this? Because some of these functions can be reusable for other programs. So let's separate them out into a separate file. I'm going to save it, and I'm going to just, whatever your last name is, I'm going to say last name, first name, whatever that is, custom functions in all caps. Save this. It is going to be saved in the same folder where the external file is, the regular file, which in this case is, so that's in the same folder, assignment 9 test score sample. It's in the same folder. Here it is. Okay, they're all of this is in the same folder. Okay, so the next step, so now we have two separate files, one containing the main function, which is going to call the functions to check for the existence of a file, call the function to check the float data type, and call the function to calculate the average. So you'll find those calls in the main program. So your source code program only contains the main function. The file that I just created that contains the custom functions contains only the custom functions. And notice I also added import because that is needed because we're using that in the first function. Now what we need to do, now that the two files are separate and we may reuse these in other programs, I'm going to import this function. So what I'm going to do is I'll write comments first to describe what's going on. The customs function sub-functions will be made available inside this program. So I'm going to say, and I added last name underscore first name underscore. It's kind of long, but that's what you're going to add. Your literal last name and your literal first name underscore custom functions. Even though this is a Python module, we can't do a .py. All we need to do is add the name of that Python program to this line. From last name, first name, custom functions, import. That means everything. When I add that star, that allows me to add any of these functions and make them available into this program that contains only the main function. This may be a little bit confusing when you're doing this for the very first time, but the goal is to divide and conquer. That's why we separate our work into separate functions. Now these functions can be reused in other programs by just importing them. So the next step, first we want to make sure this is saved correctly. You can even try to it's already supposed to be saved, but we'll just do a save again, and it says it already exists. You can even go in and try to run this, and it should just give you a just a blank screen because we didn't execute. Nothing was executed. But we do know now that there should not be any syntax errors here in this custom functions file. But let's run the source code file. That's what you want to run. So let's do run. It's going to ask me for a file name. I'll just put something in there. I know it's called T-scores. And I'm going to say final test scores average report. And I'll just say 200. And so now it still gave me the same results, telling me which lines contain the bad data. And now let's go and open up that file that was used to store the final results. And here it is. Feel free to review these videos as often as necessary in order to understand the concept. This is a very important conception, and we're going to be using this in our next 3 or 4 programs that we complete in this course.